everybody out there in Facebook world. This is Barbara Hort with I Am This Woman. And today I am so excited to have as my guest Josh Rydell, who is the Vice Mayor of Coconut Creek. Wow. First of all, Josh, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Well, you're welcome. But I remember when we first met, I said I loved what you were doing, and I was excited to get an invitation to come and join you.
Yes, and it's so cool. So I want to kind of share everybody, the fact of it is that what I Am This Woman is all about. And it's a platform that's been created for that women and men and people who really are passionate about what is going on in the world can come on and share their stories and their information. So let me tell you a little bit about Josh. He is the Vice Mayor of Coconut Creek. He's an attorney with a focus in criminal and civil litigation. Now, he is a past member of the Broward County Substance Abuse Advisory Board and the Florida Bar Grievance Committee. And the reason why he is a past member is because currently he is running for Broward County State Attorney. Now, explain the whole thing about the state attorney, but you're running in Broward County.
For people not in the know of politics, I like to share the story that I told you 10 minutes ago. I told my mother, about my exciting new election plans. I go, Mom, I'm going to run for Broward County State Attorney. And then my mom goes, State Attorney, are you moving to Tallahassee? When am I going to see the grandchildren? And I go, no, Mom, I'm not going to Tallahassee, I promise. But in Florida, we call our prosecutors that run county by county. It's done by judicial circuit. We call them state attorneys. So I'm running to be the lead prosecutor for Broward County's 17th Judicial Circuit is what it's formally called. But I'm running to be that. And we'll know in August how that works out, and then I would have to give up. I have given up already, but I'd have to give up my Coconut Creek City Commission seat where I'm currently serving as the vice mayor.
Right, and that helps because I was a little confused because I was like, "Oh, you're running for state attorney," and you're like, "No, just for Broward." So I got it. Now, what's interesting is today, because we're all about women, it's I Am This Woman show, right? And you're here today to discuss the criminal justice system's lack of resources for female offenders. And you share that both in substance abuse and mental health, there's a significant gap in local services. And I did a little bit of research beforehand because I was like, okay, how many facilities are there in Florida? How many women are in there? And the fact of it is, I love the fact that you're, as a man, right, you're coming on and you're talking about this. So I really like to know, what is it that you want to talk about when it comes to this whole lack? Because I kind of get it, but I really love to understand it a little bit more.
Okay, so the gender gap I think is significant because when you look at the criminal justice system as a whole, traditionally it's 85%, 90%, even in some cases, men. It's a male fluid system where when you walk into a standard courtroom, a majority of people that have been charged with some sort of crime tend to be men. Right. And there's a lot of resources. And now there's two different issues I'd love to just talk to you about, Barbara. Please. There's a lack of connection between public and private, nonprofit and government. There's a huge gap there, specifically gender-based with women, and also just in the system as a whole. So this is something I've acknowledged and I've tried to work with. We have in the city, and I never really saw it. You hear there's amazing programs in Broward, so I don't want to diminish anything I'm saying with that. Sure. Broward Women in Distress is this amazing organization. We have the Susan B. Anthony Resource Center for young moms and pregnant moms that are going through struggles. They've renamed it the Villages, and these are some amazing programs that are partially funded and do get grant funding as a 501c3. But sure. I think that there's such a gap with all these different layers of women that fall in the criminal justice system. Obviously, I think there's a gap across the board. But when you look at the gender gap, so while there's a smaller amount of offenders, there's a considerable reduced amount of resources. And what gets me the most is our women, our young moms, are who are suffering from substance abuse, mental health issues. And there's a huge facet. See, in my city, we have a very large community of an adult population, of an elderly population. Right. And what really gets me is while we have, again, government resources and nonprofit resources, there's a gap with some of it's elderly as well. I mean, traditionally, it's proven women tend to live longer than men. And while there may be resources there, we need to do a better job at getting the right connections made and really building bridges with the community and the criminal justice system.
Yeah, and I would make up in the first place, and let's be realistic. If we're looking at politics and we're looking at the number of men who are in politics now, I know in Coconut Creek you have a really large women's. Yeah, I remember when we talked about that you have a very large female base of people that are, as far as in the, I guess in politics in Coconut Creek, but that's not the norm. And so,
So
what I want to say is, if that's the case, and if I look across, even when it comes to president, Senate, going all the way down, how is it that we would be able to make a change if the majority of the people are the men, and it's affecting women?
And I'll give you the great answer for that, because it's the comment of like, okay, Josh, how are you going on this show? How are you going to empower women? I mean, it's a fair. Anyone watching this right now may say that. What is a man going to say to empower women? But here's the reality: I'm married. I have two little girls. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm raising them in a world where things are really scary. And I want these two little girls to exude confidence and to feel comfortable and to feel empowered and to know that there is no ceiling that can't be broken and there's no obstacle they can't overcome because their gender. And one of the blessings for that a little bit has been, and you referenced it before, Barbara, this unique thing. I call it a unique thing because I don't want to, pressure other cities or other municipalities. Is in
Right.
Coconut Creek, I have a new city manager now, a woman. She was a woman. The previous one was a woman. All of our department heads, as a majority in Coconut Creek, are female and diverse females. And it's unique because there's been, we had some publications that did with leadership in the city. I serve on a panel with a couple, women as well on my commission that are just leaders. They're just
Yes.
natural, fluid leaders, and that's been really good for my daughters to see. So that's been
I
something
love
that's
that.
been really welcoming to me. So that's why this is important to me, and I think that you don't do anything if you don't acknowledge it's an issue. So are there
Right.
more men involved in politics than women? Yes, there
Yes.
are. But if
Yes.
you don't acknowledge it, we're not going to do anything to fix it.
100%. And Jason, who is watching right now, saying, it's so important to empower women and children, but he also gave you a big thumbs up because he says Josh is amazing and vote for Josh for Broward State, attorney, which I love that. And you know what? I love he's saying that it's great to see you on the show. And, I think what's really, really important to me is that I think it is important to have men come on to I Am This Woman, because I love the fact you do have daughters, you are married, you have a mother, right? The fact of it is you have women that are in your life. And so what you're doing does impact us. And it does make a huge, huge, difference when we have men who are standing beside us, standing behind us, and really, not just only thinking about what's out for them, but making a difference here also for the women in your community.
Just in this terrible pandemic, we've gotten so many calls in our city from out of state family members that can't get here, that want the city to check on their loved ones. These are
Mm-hmm.
just easy connections and easy things you can do to make things better. And
Right.
I welcome it. I welcome the ability to just bring things up and talk about them in the open, because the reality is, if you don't have that discussion, something you're doing, and that's when I met you and we exchanged information and I started watching your shows. I love it. You've had some really inspirational people on the show and it's funny, Jason, I just connected with recently, who just commented, and he is all about empowerment. He does some
Mm-hmm.
really brilliant things just in a community. He's very involved in the city of Coral Springs, one of my neighboring cities, for mental well-being and mental alliances and mental passion. You got it. These are the people that need to be activated. I firmly believe that.
Well, and I think so. And I think it's so important that you bring up this really great point that, we're never going to move forward. Man, woman, I don't care who it is. And that's why I think it's important to have men come on the show. First of all, I want your little girls to know that if they decided, look, in January, I was like, I think I'm going to do a show, right? And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'm going to do a show. And I love that. And then I love that the fact of it is that I have amazing guests like you that come on and that are a part of this and that really are being a stand for women. And that's what this is about. It really is.
I'm gonna digress real quick, Barbara,
Yeah,
real quick,
please.
and I just want to tell you something because it's fun. So I obviously the nights that I can, that I'm not out, on a Zoom call or campaigning or running a city commission meeting. There's it was a bestseller. It came out on the New York Times bestseller list for books, and it's a book, and it's called Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. Have you seen this book?
I haven't, but I want this
Okay,
book.
so literally, it's called Goodnight Stories for. We've totally strayed off topic, but it's okay.
That's
So
okay. I stray off
there's
all the time. No worries.
and I read it to my girls every night, and another friend of mine introduced it to me, and it's called Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, and literally it goes from from Cleopatra to the Queen of England now, and all the amazing women in between, and it's a one page. Now, granted, there's some of the stories when you know the real story, like historically,
Right.
not necessarily for kids, but how they're written is such empowerment, and then you realize that we wouldn't even remotely be here today if it wasn't for Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls of rebel women that changed our world.
Yes. I love the fact of Rebel Women. I love the fact that you read and you're empowering these young, brave, beautiful women that you're growing up, like you're helping to raise to create that. Because I think that that's the thing that we get to know that our girls, like, they get to be these amazing, dynamic women. And I know that, when I think about me creating this show and doing this, and I remember when I first told someone, they said, "You're going to do what?" And I was like, I'm gonna do a show, and then people see it and they're like, wow, it's pretty good. So I think that this is so perfect. So now we're gonna jump back over and by the way, Josh, I do this all the time. When I get on here, I start talking about something else. And that's why when you asked me at the beginning how long the show is, and I said, well, maybe 30 minutes or maybe 45, because we'll start talking and having a good
All right.
time. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the criminal system. And by the way, that is thunder. And I think, whoa. So let's talk about the criminal system and really with female offenders, because I wonder, there's a question that I have for you regarding female offenders. And the fact of it is that when I think about female offenders, when you said 96% are men, and so you're looking at 4% are women, the majority of them going in there, you talked about the substance abuse and mental health, and how do those two things, the substance abuse and mental health, ties together with the fact that with the female offenders.
I mean, a majority of female offenders legitimately have one concern or the other. I don't want to, and a lot of times it's a coupled approach. So you see people that find themselves in the criminal justice system, that whether it's a mental health issue, a mental wellness issue, or it's coupled with self-medication through drugs, whether even allowable prescription medication, illicit drugs. There's a spectrum of methods of self-medicating. Sometimes people self-medicate with alcohol, and you could buy that in any Walmart or Walgreens liquor store. So
Exactly.
that's a huge consideration. So, but what I've seen, and when kind of the topic that came up here, is there's very limited resources that the criminal justice system has in Broward, and sadly enough, in some of our less populous counties, it's a lot less. There's a lot less resources. We're at least blessed in this county to have engaged government, but the problem is we need more of it. There is not remotely enough programs. I have a client right now that's in the Susan B. Anthony program. Young mom, struggled with drugs, has kids, and it's been very difficult with just the ease of, and this is pre-COVID, with just getting transport orchestrated for her kids in school. And she's really unsure right now, after this amazing program that she's in, where's she going to go? And there's not a lot of facilitated housing now. She's kind of doesn't have the best family support system, right?
Right.
So where do you go if you don't have family to go to? Where do you go when you've completed this great program where your kids are in a healthy, well place, that you're making yourself healthy? Now the key is that there's got to be a continuum of care. And
Sure.
in our female criminal justice system, there's some obstacles in the, I guess, for using the term continuum of care. So in the private sector, if I have the best insurance and more money than God, will I have a continuum of care? Well, gender doesn't affect that.
Hmm.
When you got money, you have access, and that's the problem with the system as a whole right now.
Right.
It's fed to the haves versus the have-nots. But if we can give everyone opportunity, especially with women, there can be such a great continuum of care so that when they realize they got an issue, they can get the help they need, but that help doesn't lapse. Because what I've seen is when you have people in this revolving door in the criminal justice system,
Right.
due to lapses in support. And it could be, and that really I think is true in any capacity, but really highlighted when someone it finds himself with a criminal case.
Well, and that's so interesting to me because that's the one thing about it. I always say this, by the grace of God go I, right? Because if I would have was raised in a different way, if I had different parents, and I think that goes for any of us, we could be down that road. And I think what's so interesting to me is the fact that we don't have these facilities. We don't have this. And Amy just posted it. She says, she goes, no, there isn't a lot of facilitated housing. I have worked with women in rehab centers that go back to the environments where it is easy to go back to the destructive habits. Because if you are in there, I call it the circle, right? And if your circle is this and you step out of it, you're like, oh, this is freedom over here. But then you go back into it. How do you do that? So how is it that what are you trying to do with the fact of wanting to run for, the state attorney of Broward County? What is it that you see could be really supportive and especially supporting women? And like for me, as someone who's really about women's empowerment, what can I do to help to make the difference as well?
I mean, my mind. I've been in the criminal justice system for 15 years, so I've seen it all: the good, the bad, and the very very ugly. So I've seen the system not really working with a lot of the smaller cogs in the system. And when I got elected in Coconut Creek, that was this epiphany. It was this guy with a unique background that I wanted to serve. I didn't do it. You don't get in government for the money. You do it because you want to serve. So I
Mm-hmm.
got into Coconut Creek, and I realized there's so many interconnections where just in my city, in a municipality, that I can make relationships with nonprofits, with businesses, with residents, and you can actually uplift the whole community. It goes back to that an age-old adage that that all moms say, whereas it takes a village. And
Yes, it
that is one
does.
of the most true statements in any world you take it. So the question is, what got me into this race is seeing failures in a system and being a big enough man to say, I got to correct it. And understanding the failures in the system to say, hey, I get how we can at least start the conversation of bringing people to the table. There's great public partnerships, private partnerships, nonprofit relationships, and the post that we just saw that you just read, that is so spot on, and it goes exactly to these lapses. And in drug court, there's a mantra, and there's a mantra in recovery. It's you got to always be cognizant of your people, places, and things, because that's it. And for the woman that just posted it, you get it, and especially with our women, if you're a young mom or you have kids, and maybe that the father is the bad influence, or maybe some other family members, it's hard to change your environment and
Right.
get the comfort and the stability you need. And that's why we need a lot more resources into these core family units. We have this. There's an organization in Broward called Coast to Coast Legal Aid, and they're the legal aid provider. They are an amazing organization, but could they use a lot more?
Right.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I love that you said it takes a village because that's something that I say all the time because I truly believe that. And that's why when I have this, I am this woman, because I want women to know you've gone through this. You maybe have, I see a revolving door also because of the fact that you have a mother who's been in jail, then children who go, and so it continues. And I would say certain also, I as being a woman of color, I think that that is something that is even more so And so that's something that's really, I'm passionate about, because I think one of the things that I want to be able to do is help to break that cycle. But I do agree, when you are living in the same neighborhood because you can't afford good housing, when you barely can afford food to put on your tables, that village, and I would say this, I'm doing this because I believe in service also. So I believe that we're the village, and that we get to be the village that really helps to stop and to make a difference on all of this. So how is it that, I love the fact that you're talking about these nonprofits, because I work for a nonprofit. I'm an executive director for a nonprofit. So I'm very passionate about that. And for people out there who are watching this and going, like, this is really frustrating, how do we start to make a change? Because I feel like in the when you think about politics, it's this against that versus being for the people. So how do we do something to make a difference there?
Well, and I think it sounds like the easy part, but it's not necessarily the easy part. And the reality is just having a voice. Because what I've noticed, at least in municipal governments, is when people are legitimately engaged in the system, when they're really engaged and they understand it, then you can actually start diverting resources, having legitimate discussions. I'll give you this example. In Broward, we have all these stakeholders, whether it's education, whether it's criminal justice, whether it's the government center, whether it's a municipality, that's so fractured. We have all these different stakeholders that have their own motivations and their own budgets and all of it. We need to have better togetherness across the board. Because if we can all understand, well, guess what? My problems in the criminal justice system, that actually affects the entire county. And that affects a lot of municipalities. And when you talk about the county, Broward County as a whole, and other municipalities, that's funding. I mean, Barbara, I'm talking. If you're the executive director,
Right.
There's a funding relationship there. You understand that.
It's huge. And I make up with the COVID-19 and everything that's going on. Funding has changed so drastically. And this is a really great question, because with COVID-19, we don't hear a lot about COVID-19 in these correctional institutions, or we hear a little bit. And so how is that showing up, and how is that even changing, like, the landscape of everything that's going on as well?
I mean, the problem with COVID-19 is it comes, and at least in the criminal justice system, it shuts down the entire system. I give credit to a couple really significant judges that were stakeholders in trying to put together a system to get people out. But there's people, I literally this morning was sent an article of in Florida's Department of Corrections facilities, somebody contracted COVID. They were removed from a ventilator. They went back to the facility. They died this morning. So this is a rampant issue in how we're having to address a major public health crisis, because traditionally, when people are incarcerated, they're not getting the health care they need or deserve, or and even more so when you add having guards in the mix of how are you watching this person. It's troubling, and I think a lot of it maybe in our government structures, no one was equipped for this. There was no plan to handle it, and it's really defined as who's been making the most waves, who's doing the most to prepare for it. And I mean, we're doing this show on the eve of Broward County opening. You've been open for a week in Palm Beach County, so
Which scares me. I look at the openings and I'm like, I'm one of those ones who go, I'm just going to wait a little bit. I'm going to see. And then, because how do we do this? We want to go back. We want to do this. We want to get back to life. But, those are the things. Now, this is interesting. You had mentioned something, when we're talking about facilities. So when I did a little research, and then I started looking at the different institutions that are throughout the state. And there's a lot, especially within women institutions, there's a lot of abuse and neglect. And there's a major problem that we're having, when we're talking about with guards and a lot of sexual abuse, and to the fact that they brought in the federal government to do some investigation back in 2018 with I think it's Lowell prison. So how this is one of the things that really blows my mind, because I want to be one of the women. I would love to go in and say, I want every woman in prison to know, whether you are in prison with the bars or in prison in your home, because whatever, that you are this woman. This is so important. So how is it that we start to shape this? Because I agree with you, like you were saying, with some of the things that we could to do. But for everyone out there who's going like, well, if they do it, or if they do it, you know, I think that's one of the biggest concerns I have as a woman and as women who are there. What is it really that we can do? Like if someone was going to do something now, to say, write an email or do this or do that, what would be the thing that they can do now to be able to
You
do it?
know, and that's actually the most difficult question right now, because
Hmm.
what matters, and this is what I tell everybody. I speak at a lot of high schools. I speak to a lot of career days, and I ask people in my own city. I go, you know, the mayor is of your city. You know anyone on the commission? They don't even know I'm on the commission. They go, no. I go, do you know who your local representatives are? Do you know who any of your county commissioners are? And the answer is no.
No,
But do you know who the president is? Of course we do.
right.
In local government really matters. And what I would tell people is that you need to be engaged locally to the highest
Mm,
level possible. I'm running for a job that's going to further shape Broward County. I mean, we have an incarcerative thought of, law and order has always been, let's lock people up and that's it. That's how you keep people safe. That's not how you keep people safe. You keep people safe by educating them. You keep people safe by building them up. You keep people safe by building a community to help them. That's how you keep people safe.
yeah.
Obviously, are there bad people? Of course there are. And,
Yes.
those are people
Yes.
that the system is meant for. But a majority of other people, not necessarily meant for that. But my advice to anyone listening, Barbara, and you got to be an active resident. And I will tell you, the biggest purse strings, and I say this from a municipality, a middle municipality in Broward. We got 60,000 residents. We have a pretty big budget. But the biggest purse strings for Broward County that could affect all of our lives is Broward County as a whole, is these county governments that have real resources to trigger to utilize and change services. So if we can make our county government better actors, then we can get them really engaged in starting to fix crime, specifically in bridging the continuum of care with some of these female offenders that I know that we can do better for. But you're right, COVID, we don't know. I mean, I think of a lot of our nonprofits are going to take a hit,
Yeah.
regrettably. So I think a lot of people doing really good work, it's going to be hard. But I know the American will. We're going to come out of it. We're just going to be coming out of it wearing masks and hand sanitizer, but we're going to come out of it.
Well, you know what? I think the best thing about it, and some Yali who is watching says, there's major issues with abuse with all the centers, juvenile, women in correctional facilities, and not much is being done about it. And I think
Absolutely true. That is
it's such a big thing.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
Because you know why?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. There right now, and I didn't want to go on this tangent, but for example, in Palm Beach County, there was anyone watching who's in the rehabilitation world knows there was gross mismanagement in Palm Beach County. You saw it, these pill mills, these terrible patient brokers. The
Right.
state attorney in Palm Beach, his name's Dave Ehrenberg. Dave cracked down on it. He had a task force. He arrested dozens and dozens of people. He made such a difference in cleaning up rehabilitation. And now he started going after bad actors in state run facilities, which for years has been, oh, you're not going to go after another arm of government. But that's what we need to be doing in Broward. The bad actors, you need to go after them. We can't keep putting, and this is, I don't know if we'll have time to get here, Barbara. I'm doing another event in the beginning of June with a gentleman who's been fighting for children's rights. We put abused kids, both boys and girls, in homes that are documented with abuse, both physical, sexual, emotional, but yet they keep going to the same places and no one comes in and prosecutes these bad
Right.
people. We need somebody that's going to stand up and
Yeah.
take the real bad people out of society while kind of helping and educating the people that don't belong there.
Well, as someone, because I have a friend of mine who has her foster daughter, who she had since she was very, very young. They, after almost 4 years, they put her back into the care of the parent. And it seems like a lot of times foster parents have no rights, they have no voice. And I think that this is something so, so vitally important, is that we have to start to know that if some of these foster parents, there are some really great foster parents out there. And this goes for all of this stuff. And I think that when we talk about women being in incarceration, part of that is because of the way that they're being raised, the cycle that continues to happen. And so when we pull a kid out of there and we put them into a great home, and then we turn around and we put them back into that situation, we're part of the issue, we're part of the problem. And if there's a judge sitting up there, they need to be able to listen to what is best for the child also. And I think that that's some of the things that have to
Well,
be addressed and
you're
what's going
absolutely
on.
right. And really, what it boils down in my mind to how you when we're talking about really fixing things, we need better interconnectivity between our agencies. When you look at the most catastrophic failures that have happened, whether in criminal justice or any components of society, it's because communication between agencies that are supposed to work together. I
Right.
mean, the general public believes that, oh, everyone works together. Well, that's not
Hmm.
necessarily true.
Yeah.
We and you need people active. We need to activate people, but because at the end of the day, I've seen it firsthand in government. I've been able to get things done in the city and get programs funded and things created because I go and I lobby and I talk, and that's how you move it. That's how you can move the needle doing things.
Hmm.
But it really takes activism. But what you're doing is an example of amazing activism because you're out having a narrative and people that are educated. I don't care where you are, what you come
Right.
from, whatever you do. If you're educated and you understand it, you actually have the ability to facilitate change. And it only takes one person. I firmly
Right.
believe that.
I agree. And so Yali said, she agrees it requires active citizens to make a change, not
Yep.
only during elections. And I love that statement because I think it's so incredibly important. Now, Amy here mentioned I work with incarcerated youth in Dade, specifically the female population. And yes, there's definitely a cycle that needs to be interrupted from childhood, and we need a system that will rehab these youth. And what's great is Yali, who is watching, she has a program called Breaking Barriers, and it's all about breaking that especially with young men of color, that thought of I can only do this is all I can do. And she is one of the nonprofits that are in Broward County, and that's what we need. And so I love the fact that you're saying that it's not, look, I don't think that it all sits in your lap because you're in politics. I think it sits in all of us, and it's all of our responsibilities to get up and speak and to say and to really make a statement of how can we make things better, because no matter what, it might not be affecting your family directly, but it's affecting your family, you
Well,
know?
I'll say this, Barbara. I bit off a lot running for a really big job, and I did it for a reason. If you asked me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have told you my life path would have taken me here. But I saw a failure in a system, and exactly like that comment we just said, we've had a revolving door in a
Yeah.
system, and we'd be ignorant if we're saying it's not a revolving door in regarding minorities and poor people. That's a
Right.
fact of how this revolving door is created. So if we could at least acknowledge and have a conversation and start educating, and I always say this, I go to a lot of debates and I'm in this campaign race. The first time somebody sees a prosecutor, it shouldn't be in a courtroom at
Thank
all.
you. Yes.
It should
Yes.
be in a classroom. And
Right.
I've been saying this, and I go when I go. A lot of times I go as an elected official, and a lot of times high school kids look at me. I was younger when I got elected. I was 33. When I was a younger man, they would look at me and they'd be like, "You're really young," and I was like, "Yeah, I am young, and these little girls are mine, and I
Yeah.
feel more connected to you than I probably do your teachers." But
Yeah.
let's have a real conversation about how we can tie. If we get to our youth, we can change the world, whether it's criminal
Right.
justice. And I look at it like this: Florida has one really big problem. I'm going to change complete subjects.
Go
We
for
have
it.
the worst recycling program in the entire country. Recycling is really bad here. Our whole waste system is terrible. It's a fight I've been fighting on another level. I got a lot of fights, for
Yeah, you
society,
got a
but
lot
for
of
Mother
plans.
Earth, my older daughter was born on Earth Day. The Earth is really important to me. We have a terrible recycling program, but still to this day, I remember when I was growing up, I took the glass, I put them in one bin, the papers in another bin, and the cardboard in another bin. We had 3 bins, and I grew up like that. That was ingrained in my head because of
Mm.
educating a child. And if we can do that, and we can get the right, if it takes a village, if we can get the right teachers to come to whatever village it is, we can change the world. And we have to acknowledge that all of our communities are different. And we need to go to the
Yeah.
people that know those communities the best to facilitate a change.
And I love that because, Yali says you change the youth and we'll change the world. And I think, and then Amy mentions about communication between the agencies is not streamlined. But I love what you just said, that if we can go into the communities, because you are one person, but imagine the ones in the communities, what is possible and what can we do? So I always ask questions of my guests and everything, because I always love to get in your head and figure out, all that. I'm gentle though. I'm really nice with that. Tell me this. What is your vision? Like, if you were to say, this is my vision for the world, for me, for my family, whatever it is, what is your vision?
My vision is to actually live in a county that my kids are safe no matter where they go. They will never feel the fear that I've had growing up due to some issues where I grew up. That my daughters will be empowered to live their dreams in a fearless capacity, to live in a county where we embrace mental illness. We understand that it's an illness and not a stigma. We got to
Mhm.
eliminate the stigma with mental health. That has to happen. We have to acknowledge that there's so many people. I just see that we can be better stewards. Those that want to serve, those who are in government, leaders, whether you have a nonprofit, whether you're leading a community, we are tasked with leaving this earth better than we found it. And I'm also like a total freak when it comes to like environmentalism, candidly, and I think we could do so much more there in terms of being just better citizens on the earth, whether it's recycling, whether it's just cleaning up after yourself, whether it's picking up garbage when you're walking down the street. Like I do that every day and my kids now do it. But I just envision us
Mhm.
being, making Broward better. I really believe we can make things better for everybody. And I don't care what community you come from, but it's
Right.
that I could go on, but I'm
But it's the
excited for the
first
next one
step.
out of those.
No, no problem. What keeps you going?
My kids, my kids and my wife. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of times it's hard. And, the one thing I'll say this is, I'm married 10 years. Marriage is hard. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary in a quarantine. So that trip
Yeah.
we planned didn't happen. We had a fun time backyard with the
Where were
kids.
you
But
going? Where were you going to go?
ideally, probably the Keys. That's like our getaway, to shoot down there,
Oh,
do
okay.
something
Yeah.
like that. I would. You made me lose my train of thought with that because I was envisioning like a beach. I haven't seen one. I haven't seen one of those in a while. But
I
what
know.
keeps me going is just passion for what I do. I love helping people. Like love helping people, and I love my family. And even though it's hard on my wife sometimes because when you are stretched really thin and you're in government and now I'm campaigning, but at the end of the night, you know what? I know that she's probably downstairs watching this right now, and she probably has my kids
Aw.
watching it. And I know that that keeps me going. I don't say it to her enough. So if she's watching, hopefully she hears it. If not, she'll watch it on a rerun. But I mean, you got to be driven by what you love and who you love.
I agree. How do you keep a positive mindset?
So it's good. It started a couple years ago when Headspace came out. You know what Headspace is?
I don't.
It was like an app. It's an app on the phone for meditation and positive affirmations and things like that I got. And then they started charging like $99 for it. And then I was like, don't need that
Eh,
anymore. I could find some other things on YouTube that are just as good. But I try to at least at some point during the day just clear myself and just and refocus because you gotta stay grounded and you gotta stay focused on kind of your goals sometimes.
So one of the biggest things to me that has happened back in January is when Kobe Bryant and his daughter and the other seven people passed away. One of the things, though, because I wasn't a big follower of his, but I was so wowed by how what he created in his last 3 years. And what he said is he had told his best friend, he says, when you retire, know this. Basketball is your first love. You'll have to know what is your next love. And Mamba mentality is what he created and really wanted to work with his daughters because he had all girls and really empower them. And he created that legacy in those last 3 years. So if you're going to have a legacy that you're leaving, what is your legacy?
I think if I'm going to leave a legacy, it was that when I'm old and gray and like sitting in a home somewhere, that my kids tell stories like his kids are going to tell of him about how my dad changed the world, how my dad made things better, how my dad stood up for what was right. I think that's forget buildings in your name and all that. I don't think any of that matters. I think if we can leave some sort of lesson of positivity and change, then
Yeah,
then I think we did our job.
I love that. In the next 45 days, what will you create?
Add that to like 70 something days, and it'll be the determination of an election or not. I can't tell you that much. But really, over this this quarantine, my focus has really been the city. Obviously, I'm campaigning, and that's important. I look forward to hopefully making that a bigger role. But we've been really just focused on Coconut Creek. And over the next 45 days, what will I create? Hopefully a safe opening environment for our businesses in the municipality, our residents, now that we're opening, and just allowing so many people that have been so badly affected. I've spent most of this quarantine trying to talk to small business owners and build people up, because the lifeblood of anything is your small businesses, is your mom and shop pizzerias, is it's not even, and sometimes it's a franchisee, or but people were devastated by what's gone on. So what am I going to create? I'm going to create a welcoming, flourishing community in the city that I can control some part of, to kind of build it up and make sure that people have a livelihood again. Because I think the hardest thing is people can't get unemployment money. I haven't been to court in 60 days. It's almost crazy to think like that.
Right.
I went from a building that I was in every day for over 15 years to not stepping foot in over 60.
Right.
So we have to come back from this, and it's going to take positivity and support.
I love that. So what is your biggest hurdle to climb?
You could have me stumped on that one. My biggest hurdle to climb right now in my visioned head is probably this election. But my biggest hurdle to climb is probably just consensus in anything I do. And that may sound like a weird hurdle, but I think when you're fighting and you're advocating, you're trying to change things, building consensus, I think sometimes is the hardest thing. And that seems to be an obstacle that when I'm on this path, you got to get consensus, because no matter what you do, you got to have a community buy into it if you're really going to affect change.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I just want to thank you, because I think that what you're doing and how you show up, and what I love is not only how you show up for your community, but how you show up for your girls, how you show up for your wife, how you show up for other women. And when we first met, you told me, you said, "Oh, I'm going to be there. I'm going to support you." And a lot of people say that, but you did. And what I loved about it is that I didn't have to chase you down. You literally sent me a message saying, "Hey, Barb, I really like what you're doing, and I would love to be on the show."
That day we met, the doctor who spoke, and some of the people that were there. And just for anyone who's watching, we met. There's a resident I have in Coconut Creek that has an organization where she does a lot of build up to women suffering from, recovering from breast cancer and other types of cancers. She's been an amazing asset in Coconut Creek. I don't want to throw her name out. I don't know if she'd want me to, but she did a little brunch meeting, and that's how me and Barbara connected. And I think that embodies what I've tried to do. Just showing up to something like that, just to show, hey, your city supports you, and we're in a little brunch conference room, but your call to action, you're changing the world, you're making a difference. And I'll always support that and stand by that. And you had such a good energy when I met you. I was like, I'm coming on the show.
I know. And I'm like, yes, we did it. I'm so excited. And, I would just say, what would be the last things that you want people, especially, if you live in Broward County, if you know someone in Broward County, I know my mom lives there, brothers, sisters, cousins, I have family there. And if you know of anyone in Broward County, tell them, Josh, to me, you get to vote for this man because of how he's showing up here and everything. But what is it, the one thing for anyone who's watching, wherever they're watching, what is it, the one message that you want to leave for them?
Well, the shameless plug is the election's on August 18th in Broward County. That's the shameless plug.
There's no shameless in that. That is, what is? That is something to be proud of, because you are making a difference and you're stepping up. And if that's August 18th, just in case if you didn't hear August 18th, and if for the ones in the back who didn't hear August 18th, you make sure you go and you press the button, you color it in, you do whatever it is. Rydell.
Request a vote by mail. But Barbara, to answer the question, really, I'm a firm believer that everyone just needs to find their voice, and everyone can make a change. You can make a change, and it's whether it's to 2 million people, 2,000 people, 200 people, or 2 people. The smallest thing in the world, the smallest gesture, a smile, could change somebody. And if we, as just people, all people, saw that we can each do good and we can each make changes, we are going to be so much better off. And if I can inspire that in any capacity, then, forgetting elections, forgetting jobs, forgetting titles, then mission accomplished in this life, if we make things a little bit better.
I always say that when you honor your truth, and you speak it and you share it, and that's what happens. So I usually do this when I ask my show guests. Now, you're not a woman. I usually say, I am this woman in your name, but I won't make you do that. But for your girls and for your wife, I would love for you to say their names and say, they are this woman, whatever it is. But if you could share their names, because just in case when they watch, they can hear their names.
Oh, my wife Jamie, my daughters Rachel and Isabella.
Yeah, and they are
I am
definitely.
this woman for my daughters because they are at a generation where they need to be empowered, and they will be empowered thanks to people like you, Barbara, and a torch you're carrying right now.
Thank you. And I love that you said, I am this woman for my girls. That is incredible. I swear I'm going to get a t-shirt. I'm going to send it to you so you can wear that, because I think that's awesome. So just in case, guys, if you are looking at this and you're like, gosh, Barbara's amazing, and I definitely want to get to know her, and I want to talk to her about some things, send me an email at barbara@iamthiswoman.com. We are building the website. We're very close to it. So we're looking for bloggers because we want women to share their stories. And men, please share your stories. That's something that's going to impact women. You can email blog@iamthiswoman.com. And one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working on a book after being very afraid not to do it for so long. I'm looking still for 5 women to be involved, and email me at book@iamthiswoman.com to say, yes, you want to be a part of it. Here's the thing, guys. What this is all about is for me is having a dream and saying, I'm going to go for it. And then being able to have an incredible guest on the show. And this is Joshua Rydell. He is running for Broward County State Attorney. So on August 18th, make sure you go out there and support him. And please look up, because if there's someone who's watching and you're in another county or whatever you're doing, this is what, when someone decides to get involved, this is what difference they can make. Everyone, for this special edition show of I Am This Woman, I am Barbara Ford. I am definitely this woman. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys on Friday. Take care, everyone.